All right. Hello. Hey, friends. Hello, nobody. Whoever listens to these. Um, it's been so long since I recorded one of these that I literally forgot what the app is called that I use to record them. Man, I'll get back to into it. I'll get back into it soon. Hopefully, this is the beginning of getting back into it. I didn't even realize that the last one I made on this is just freaking halfway through a paper. So I'm going to have to just see if I remember what this was about. I think it'll come back to me as I go, and then there's a summary here. So I don't know. I guess I'll just start. In summary, experiencing is defined as an organismic process felt from moment to moment as a preconceptual, implicitly manifold, and integrative direct referent. Oof, let me read that again. In summary, experiencing is defined as an organismic process felt from moment to moment as a preconceptual, implicitly manifold, and integrative direct referent. Okay, do I remember what the fuck all that means? Okay. Um. Honestly, so experiencing. Wow, it's been so long that I'm not even like. It's not as easy for me to just like talk off the top. Um. Experiencing is an organismic process, so it's a process that goes on in the organism as in our body, our living animal flesh nature. It is a process of our living body felt from moment to moment, right? So in each instance it is felt. Preconceptual, meaning it exists in a form that is unarticulable or as yet inarticulate, right? Like you can sense it and you are aware of it and you can point to it as something, but you haven't yet articulated it. You haven't preconceptual before being a concept, right? So it's specific, not general. It's right. It's it's not an idea. It's a definite thing that you can point to, right? That doesn't exist in the abstract, which is not like a category. It's not a. It's not. How do I like explain what that means? So, for example, my phone here. I have my phone in my hand. To call it a phone, the idea of a phone, there's the concept of a phone. Phone, the concept that I know other phones can fit into, right? It's an idea, it's a category in my head. If I saw another phone, I'd be like, oh, yes, that's also a phone. It fits into the concept of phone. But if I don't have that idea of phone in the abstract, I might see another phone. I have a Apple product. I might see another kind of phone, maybe made by a different company, so it doesn't look exactly the same. I wouldn't know what it was. All I would be able to do is confront and engage with directly what it is in front of me and be like, oh, well, it's this shape, it feels like this, etc. But I wouldn't be able to say, this is what it is, this is the concept of it, this is the idea of it. So, okay, that's what I'm just trying to hash out what preconceptual means. So it's before that stage, right? It's the phone before you know how to call it a phone, right? So it's the feeling that you have and you can describe, but you don't. It's not something that you can. Yeah, I said it right. Implicitly manifold. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what that means. It's specifically the manifold part. I think probably that means like that it's the fuck even. I don't even know exactly what the definition of manifold is. But what comes up for me is just that there's a lot, right? Like there's a lot there. If you look at it, if you peel back the layers, if you like zoom in, there's a lot there, and it's kind of like endlessly, infinitely rich, as he's said elsewhere, right? That like you can go and look into it, and you'll never exhaust your ability to describe what you notice. That's what I'm getting from that. And then integrative direct reference. Direct reference is, I mean, maybe I should have read the other first half before I started this, but whatever. Direct referent, I mean, that reminds me of just the general thing and focusing of directly referencing back to your felt sense to check, right, or directly referencing back to your experiencing. Right? I guess this paper, yeah, was written before that idea of felt sense really got hammered out. Right, but directly referencing back to experiencing to check as like a touchstone to check whether you're accurate when you try to describe it. You refer back to it directly. This part though, the integrative, so this paper is about congruence, right? So it's the congruence between what? The congruence between okay. The content of his awareness symbolizes all of the content of his organismic experience. So everything that exists within experiencing is also represented in your awareness. So again, this is like, I'm not versed in Jung, but I would imagine that like the idea of a shadow is what would happen if you're incongruent, right? Where the shadow is in your organismic experience, but it's not symbolized within your awareness, right? It's kept out of your awareness. Thus the name. In the shadows, in the dark, hidden from view. Okay. Yeah, I think I get it enough to keep going. So, part 3. Experiencing is implied and required by Rogerian theory. Although experiencing is a new concept, I believe that it is already implied by Rogerian theory. The theory can be understood only if certain functions of experiencing are assumed. If the assumed functions of experiencing are left out, much of the theory seems open to devastating objections. Devastating objections. Before dealing with these objections, I would like to further discuss 2 functions of experiencing as they are assumed in Rogerian theory. These are A, its function as a basis of perception, and B, its function as a dynamic process that integrates experiences. So experiencing as a basis of perception, that's interesting, since perception, phenomenology of perception, I know Gendlin has written about Merleau-Ponty and the phenomenology of perception. I've been in a book club about that. I read it in college. It was one of my favorite books from college. So that's interesting to me. And then B, the function of experiencing as a dynamic process that integrates experiences. Right? So that, I think in that, he's kind of getting at the idea that experiencing is the process that well, maybe not. I was going to say experiencing is the process that leads to congruence. But maybe that's not right. I would say, and this is pulling from Gendlin that came later, but that it's, focusing. It's focusing that that creates that congruence, right? Because focusing is the process of symbolizing that which is inarticulate. It's symbolizing raw experiencing. That's what it was. Focusing is the symbolizing of raw experience, raw experiencing, right? So that moment to moment implicit felt preconceptual thing, focusing is the symbolization of that. And that process bridges the gap, right, from the contents of experiencing to the contents of awareness. So this B part here, the function of experiencing as a dynamic process that integrates experiences. So experiencing integrates experiences. Okay, I guess we can just keep going. And then Gendlin believes that experiencing is already implied by Rogerian theory. It can only be and that theory can only be understood if these A and B things are assumed. If they're not assumed, then the Rogerian. So in a way, like, I guess what's happening here is that Gendlin is fleshing out Roger's theory and saying like, yeah, Roger's theory is correct or works and makes sense, but there are these aspects of it that you need to further explain, because if you don't parse out what particular things mean or like what premises exist behind certain elements of Rogerian theory, then Rogerian theory is open to devastating objections. So, okay. So, A. Rogerian theory implies the function of experiencing as a basis of perception. Earlier, I showed that experiencing is a process which both subjectively and physiologically contains a complex organization of many events in one momentarily present datum. With this implicit organization, experiencing functions as a basis of perception. I will discuss this function first under its subjective and then under its physiological aspect, as these are implied in Rogerian theory. Both subjectively and physiologically contains a complex organization of many events in one. So in one momentarily present datum, right? So in one little bit of, such an interesting word, datum here, a piece of data, right? A piece of data, and by that he means like a particular feeling that you notice in your body, I think, basically is a fine way of expressing that. So a piece of data, a datum, something that you notice in you, in your experience, that contains both subjectively and physiologically a complex organization of many events. So subjectively meaning that, or what's the distinction here? I don't know. Like physiologically, so like physically, like in your body, I don't know what, like that there is a lot, like behind any one feeling that you notice in your body, that there's like a lot going on physically which creates that experience. And then, but the subjectively part is, I don't know if it's getting at like what it all means to you and like all the, right? Because like if you think about focusing, it's like, okay, I notice a thing, like my belly's tight, right? So that's like a datum. Oh, like I notice that my belly feels squeezed. So that experience of, so that, or that bit of datum, that your belly feels squeezed, there's a whole host of complex stuff going on in your body in general that leads to that, whatever is going on that makes you feel that. But also, if you pay attention to it, if you focus on that feeling in your belly or about your belly, you will discover an infinite amount of subjective, meaningful stuff. Like, right, that's what happens when you focus. It's like, okay, I'm asking like if it's okay to be with that, right? And then it's like, oh, now I like a memory showed up, or like an image showed up, or like a word showed up, etc. That's what I'm guessing is meant. So with this implicit organization, also, this is kind of random, but this idea of implicit organization, right? The implicit is that it's like not obvious. It's kind of hidden from view. It reminds me of, I think that maybe the original quote might be from Thoreau or maybe Emerson. It's also like associated with Aldo Leopold. But in wilderness is the salvation of the world, and that's such an interesting thing because like wilderness in terms of like national parks and forests and mountains, that kind of thing. Um, there's such an interesting history to that idea, whereas it's for much or most of history, it has been the scary thing to humans, right? Wilderness is chaos. Wilderness is unorganized. Wilderness is something that needs to be conquered and organized by human reason. And part of that is because it's so complex as to be beyond comprehension. It looks like pure chaos. But if you go in and you look and you study ecology, it's like actually this is extremely organized. Extremely organized, right? That's what ecology is. That's what the study of ecology is all about, is to see the organization that actually exists within living environments, or natural environments. And I think there's a really good analogy with that and like ourselves, is that like there's a wilderness within us and we can see that wilderness and be like, oh God, that's chaos, that's darkness, that needs to be cleaned up. And we can be scared of it. Or we can be like, oh, actually, there's a lot there. I just don't understand how it works. But it works. It's working exactly how it needs to work, and it is working perfectly. It's organized in a way that I don't understand right now, but it's not something that I need to necessarily like change or bend to my will and reason, right? There's that book. I actually haven't read it, even though I've owned the book for so freaking long. Oh, what's the name of it? Just about to slip my mind. I think I learned about it on Ribbon Farm. It's like the whole idea behind Ribbon Farm, right? So seeing like a state that wilderness, whether it's a natural environment wilderness or like a human wilderness in terms of just like unorganized society, unorganized human community, seeing like a state is like to witness that chaos or apparent chaos, seeming chaos, and to be like, I need to go in there and organize it and make it make sense to me, right? And that's what seeing like a state is all about, like showing different examples of state projects to make rational cities or whatever, and how that actually fucks things up because it is blind to the organization that already exists. Anyway, that's a long tangent, but that implicit organization reminds me of that. In wilderness is the salvation of the world. I feel like that idea applies just as much to the natural world as it does to ourselves. You know, we have a wilderness within us. Maybe I don't know, but I wonder, and I would maybe even guess that the Wilderless, right, on Twitter, like maybe that is kind of what his name is about. I know that he is a young guy, a young guy, and you know, runs workshops on imaginal work and all that stuff. So it's kind of like or dream work and stuff like that, right? Body work. Him and I have connected a lot over somatic experiencing. Or no, not somatic experiencing. Again, somatic descent, right? Somatic meditation, which is a meditation which is all about exploring the wilderness of your body in a way. So anyway, I wonder if his name is an allusion to that. Okay, so let's continue. I have read so little. Right. Many experiences are said to be somehow present at any given moment. They are said to interpret present perception and guide action. Yet these many experiences cannot all be explicitly symbolized in awareness. They are not denied to awareness, yet they are not discriminated in awareness. Rogers calls them available to awareness, yet he implies more by this term than that one can think of them when one wants to. Yet he implies more by this term than that one can think of them when one wants to. He implies that these past experiences function optimally to interpret perception, whether one thinks of them or not. In the congruent individual, all experiences function optimally to interpret present perception and to guide action. All experiences are being taken account of insofar as they bear on the present, but all experiences cannot each be symbolized simultaneously. The theory implies that all experiences function optimally in the present subjective process, not that they are all specifically symbolized. Rogers holds that any experience which functions in this optimal fashion could be symbolized if need be. However, it is their optimal functioning, not their possible symbolization, which defines optimal adjustment. Okay, so there was a lot there that I kind of went over my head on first read, but this last bit felt kind of pretty clear. So it is their optimal functioning, right? So all your experiences and stuff. It is their optimal functioning which defines optimal adjustment, not their possible symbolization, right? So they don't need to be like symbolized in your awareness in order to be functioning at their fullest and to thereby lead to optimal adjustment, right? He doesn't say congruence in here, but the optimal adjustment I think is like to be fully congruent is optimal adjustment, right? And so like what I was saying about shadow before is like, I mean, this is my own interpretation, but like that which exists within the shadow, right? So an experience which is not integrated and pushed out of awareness is not functioning optimally. And why though? I don't know. I don't know that he's providing a way to answer that right now, but that's a question that I have is like, how would Gendlin explain so an experience which is a shadow in Jungian terms, what is going on with that? It has not been integrated, it has not been experienced, because it's still there, right? Like that's the whole thing with shadow stuff, is that like it still functions in a certain way, it still influences and it guides perception and action, You just don't really know how it's working because you're trying to not be aware of it at all. Anyway, I don't know. I haven't even articulated that question very well, but I'm gonna try it. Just look closer at this paragraph. In the congruent individual, all experiences function optimally to interpret present perception and to guide action. So what does it mean to function optimally? All experiences are being taken account of insofar as they bear on the present, whether or not they're symbolized in the moment. So they function even without being symbolized. But what the hell? What does that mean, the functioning? What would it mean to not function? I don't know. That's an open question. Yeah, I don't know. I'll keep going. In what form are so very many past and present experiences in awareness in one present moment? What kind of awareness is it which functions to bring past experiences to bear so as to interpret a present situation? The theory implies a type of awareness which includes very many experiences and thus cannot be explicit or cannot be an explicit symbolization. The theory also implies that this inclusive awareness functions so that the many experiences are taken account of in present perception. Wow. Did it used to be like that? Was it so hard for me to understand things on first read before? I feel like none of this is landing when I just read it for the first time. So if they exist in the present moment, in what form do they exist? What kind of awareness is it which functions to bring past experiences to bear so as to interpret a present situation? Thus, so that when you perceive something in each moment, you are somehow taking account of all of your experiences as you are doing that. It reminds me of Gendlin's idea from a process model that I've talked about before, EV, everything by everything, right? Everything that has ever happened in your life, every experience you've ever had, not to mention everything that's happened in the entire fucking universe, is leading to every next moment. So everything that comes next is a product of everything that has happened. Everything by everything. I think I've said it before. It's kind of like a tagline for the universe or whatever. Maybe that's a tagline for God. Everything by everything, right? Or no, it's just a tagline for everything. It's like everything, every moment, every new moment, everything that happens is the brand new product presented by everything. I don't know if that made sense. It made sense to me. But so everything leads into everything else. I don't know that I've ever heard Gendlin say that, like, right? Because, like, for me as an individual, if I keep it just to all of my experiences in my life, everything that has ever happened to me leads into the next everything that I'm going to do and experience. I don't know if it's within my power or if it's a possibility for me to, like, get in the way of that process. By which I mean, like, right, so everything leading to everything is like another way of saying you're bringing every experience to bear to interpret this current situation. But, like, if I, let's say, have some big shadow, does that mean that that stuff that's in the shadow is not being brought to bear to interpret this present situation? And if so, what does that mean for that idea of Ev? Like, if I have a shadow, am I sort of like cutting out a bunch of everything? Sounds so ridiculous. This only makes sense of Gendlin readers. Shout out to you guys. Yeah. Anyway. How much more till that? I'm going to read until B. I'll just keep going. This kind of awareness, to perform this function, must be subliminal, implicit, unsymbolized, merely felt. The many experiences can all be implicit in one present subjective feeling. By implicit is meant that one can make these experiences and perceptions explicit if necessary. However, most experiences and perceptions can remain implicit in the one felt datum of a given moment. One need not symbolize them explicitly. They perform their function of interpreting the present, even though they are implicit, merely felt as part of one subjective feeling. Oh, maybe that's what subjective is about, right? That, like, difference between objective and subjective. It's like my feeling pain in my elbow is not necessarily an objective thing, right? There might not be anything that you could measure, and yet I feel pain subjectively. The theory assumes this functioning, although its theoretical term is available to awareness. Subliminal. I don't think he's used that word before. Sublime, and subliminal. Are those words? I mean, those words are like, they can't not be connected to each other, right? But I don't think of them in the same way at all. Sublime is like, I think of God, or I think of the band, the ska band, but sublime. Subliminal. What the fuck's the definition of it? What is liminal? I know that's such a popular idea on Twitter. Liminal. And then there's liminal spaces. That's a popular thing. Okay. So is it like related to the idea of a limit, right? Because it's liminal is one relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process. Transitional, right? So reaching a limit. Or two, occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold. So it seems to have a relation to the idea of the limits. And the subliminal meaning beneath a limit. Yeah. Below the threshold of sensation or consciousness. Perceived by or affecting someone's mind without their being aware of it. Yeah. Right? Like that's how the idea of shadow works. And that's what like experiencing and right, that murky edge, right? So there's the murky edge, and what's beyond that is subliminal. It's subliminal. It's underneath that edge, which itself is murky. So the awareness that we're wondering about here exists underneath awareness. It's implicit, right? It hasn't been made explicit. It's unsymbolized. I feel like all of those things mean the same thing, but Gendlin wouldn't do that. I don't think he would say redundant words. So subliminal means below that murky edge, I think. Implicit means hidden rather than out in the open. And then unsymbolized means that it hasn't been given, a word, or you don't have what's the word? A handle for it. It's merely felt rather than what? Something that you're thinking about, for example. Right? Like you can't even name it. You can't even be like, oh, there's a thing, there's a something, because it's below that. Implicit means that one can make these explicit if necessary. However, most remain hidden. Right? So it's like a Pandora's box of stuff, right? All the stuff in Pandora's box is implicit until you open it, and then that stuff's all explicit. Whether you open it or not, it's all in there. Okay. The same function of experiencing is also implied by the organismic terms of the theory. In the ideally adjusted organism, Rogers says, all stimuli are freely relayed without blockage. This implies that adjustment is not due to symbolized awareness of each organismic content. Rather, the theory implies that adjustment involves a certain manner of organismic functioning, i.e., that all events freely interact in the moment-to-moment organismic process. So I think something just came up while I read that, was like that whole the Descartes idea of I think, therefore I am, right? Like basically what he did was walk away and kind of reject that his organism was him. I am, I exist, I am a being insofar as I think. I think, therefore I am. And in the thinking is something completely different than any of the stuff Gendlin is talking about here, right? The organism part. The organism is not the thinking, right? The thinking is like this other function. But yeah, what they're saying here is that adjustment, or it's symbolized awareness. Like I think, therefore I am means that I am only insofar as there's stuff existing in my symbolized awareness of thought. It's been so long since I read Descartes, so I can't remember that well, but but optimal functioning and adjustment seems like it means that what's going on in the organism must be unblocked and flowing, and everything must freely interact for optimal adjustment, right? It has nothing to do with thought. In many ways, yeah, it does seem like the opposite of Descartes. Right? If all the shit in your organism, physiological processes, etc., are not flowing, then that is suboptimal adjustment. But yeah, I'll keep going. Excuse me. The theory states that organismic experience must be accurately symbolized awareness. Excuse me. The theory states that organismic experience must be accurately symbolized awareness, but this cannot be intended literally. It would be impossible for all organismic events which can be experienced to be in awareness as symbolized contents. Rather, the theory implies that congruent awareness is that manner of organismic functioning which allows all aspects of the organism to function. No experience is blocked, i.e., excluded from the organized flow of the process. Since it is the very nature of an organism that events in it are organized and in process, it follows that an optimal organism is simply one which is in all respects an organism. So I feel like it's not that much of a leap to say that Descartes, or like the version of Descartes who is only his thoughts, is a extremely incongruent, ill-functioning organism, because he's basically rejected everything which is an organism about himself. I think therefore I am means the organism aspect to myself is not essential to me being. But yeah, I'm curious how this happens, or not. I'm curious how Gendlin and Rogers talk about this happening. How does an experience get blocked, and what does it mean for it to be blocked? How does it get excluded from the organized flow of the process? Okay. I have now reformulated the notion of congruent awareness in two related ways. I tried to show that congruent awareness must imply that all experiences are implicit in the functioning of a subjective feeling. Yeah. I am now adding that such ideal awareness is not a symbolization of organismic content. Rather, it is an optimal manner of organismic functioning. I am now adding that such ideal awareness is not a symbolization of organismic content. Rather, it is an optimal manner of organismic functioning. So, symbolization of content versus functioning. Organismic functioning is optimal when all aspects of it are in process. Organismic functioning is optimal when all aspects of it are in process in the dynamic organization, which is the essential characteristic of organisms. Dynamic organization, which is the essential characteristic of organisms. Thus, the theory implies the optimal functioning of an organismic and subjective process, which brings past experiences to bear on present perception. So that's just a very interesting idea that he's saying the essential characteristic of organism is to be dynamically organized. Right? Like I was saying at the beginning, in wilderness is the salvation of the world, right? That there is in that wilderness chaos actually an extremely precise, dynamic kind of organization that we're prone to be blind to. So thus, the theory implies the optimal functioning of an organismic and subjective process, which brings past experience to bear. So past experiences exist in us in some way, and if they are, if the I don't know, if it's like not blocked somehow, right? If it's not excluded from the organized flow of the process. I don't know. I feel like this is still very abstract. I mean, yeah, it just is abstract. But like, like a memory or something. How does a memory get blocked from being part of the organized flow of the process? Right? Because if it is blocked, if it's excluded from the process and the flow, then it's not going to be brought to bear upon the present perception. How does that happen? What does that look like? Concretely, I don't know. Yeah, so that's that. We'll move on to B next time. All right, it's good to be back doing this. I missed Gendlin. Really missed Gendlin. Okay, till next time. Hope you're doing well.